Mr. Speaker, does the Prime Minister now accept that when he said that it was the law that trans women were women, he was wrong?
Well, Mr.
George's Day. And can I also associate myself with the remarks about the passing of His Holiness Pope Francis on Easter Monday? Being married to a Catholic, I know the profound loss for millions in Britain and across the world.
Speaker, let me be clear. I welcome the Supreme Court ruling on this issue. It brings clarity and it will give confidence to women and, of course, to service providers.
While the Supreme Court delivered clarity on transgender rights, Keir Starmer delivered nothing but questions. For 6 full days, the Prime Minister remained silent on a ruling that affects women's rights across the UK, leaving many to wonder where his priorities truly lie. In this video, we'll dissect the moment Starmer finally broke his silence, only to be accused of dishonesty in Parliament. The political fallout is just beginning.
This government's approach and my approach has been as follows: to support and implement the Supreme Court ruling, and we will; to continue to protect single-sex spaces based on biological sex, and we will. The Equality and Human Rights Commission will now issue updated guidance, and it's important that that happens and that all service providers then act accordingly. But also to ensure that trans people are treated with respect, and we will, and to ensure that everybody is given dignity in their everyday lives.
With Reform UK now positioning themselves as the true defenders of women's rights. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favour. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So, did you click the subscribe button? Great. Thank you so much. Now back to the video. While Starmer remained conspicuously quiet for nearly a week following the landmark Supreme Court ruling.
Mr. Speaker, he can't bring himself to admit that he was wrong. That was the question. But he spoke about respect and dignity and compassion and lowering the temperature.
I do think this is the time now to lower the temperature, to move forward and to conduct this debate with the care and compassion that it deserves. And I think that should unite the whole House.
So will he now apologise to the member for Canterbury, the very brave member for Canterbury, for hounding her out of the Labour Party simply for telling the truth?
The political landscape around him was anything but silent. This vacuum in leadership created a perfect opportunity for rival parties to seize the narrative, and none were quicker to capitalise than Reform UK. In a calculated political manoeuvre, Reform UK rapidly positioned themselves as the champions of women's rights, establishing their clear stance while Labour's position remained shrouded in uncertainty. This strategic positioning by Reform UK wasn't merely opportunistic, it was a deliberate move to increase the mounting pressure on Starmer and his party. With each passing day of the Prime Minister's silence, Reform UK's messaging gained traction, forcing Labour into an increasingly defensive position. The political chessboard was being rearranged while Starmer appeared to be still deciding which piece to move. Behind the scenes, sources suggest Starmer's team was engaged in frantic consultation, attempting to craft a response that would somehow thread the needle between competing interests within the Labour Party. This wasn't simply about making a statement, it was about creating a careful balancing act that could appease progressives while not alienating traditional Labour voters concerned about women's rights. The meticulous wordsmithing taking place behind closed doors revealed a party leader more concerned with political calculation than principled leadership. What makes this extended silence particularly striking is how it contrasts with Starmer's previous assertions about clear leadership. During his campaign for party leadership, and throughout his time as opposition leader, Starmer repeatedly emphasised the importance of clarity and taking decisive positions on complex issues. Yet when faced with this Supreme Court ruling, a perfect opportunity to demonstrate those very qualities, he opted instead for an extended and ultimately damaging silence. The allegations that emerged during this period paint an even more troubling picture. Multiple sources claimed that certain ministers were actively exploring methods to circumvent or dilute the Supreme Court's ruling, even before the Prime Minister had made any public comment. This suggestion of behind-the-scenes manoeuvring to undermine a judicial decision before the government had even stated its official position raised serious concerns about the administration's respect for legal institutions and transparent governance. As the days stretched on, political commentators across the spectrum began noting the unusual nature of this prolonged silence. Even typically supportive media outlets started questioning the Prime Minister's approach. The strategy, if indeed it was a strategy, rather than indecision, was beginning to backfire. Rather than appearing thoughtful and deliberative, the Prime Minister was increasingly perceived as evasive and calculating. The internal divisions within Labour became increasingly evident as well. While Starmer remained silent, conflicting statements from junior ministers and backbenchers filled the void, creating an impression of a party lacking cohesion on a fundamental issue. This disarray only heightened public interest in what the Prime Minister would eventually say when forced to address the matter. By the time the fateful PMQs approached, the 6 days of silence had transformed what might have been a manageable political challenge into a full-blown crisis of leadership. The anticipation had built to such a degree that anything short of a masterful performance would be judged harshly. The pressure cooker of Westminster was primed to explode. When Starmer finally broke his silence at PMQs, the damage had already been done. Rather than appearing as a leader who had carefully considered his position, he came across as someone who had been forced into the open, reluctantly stating a position that seemed more politically expedient than principled. The perception of dishonesty stemmed not just from what he said, but from how long he had waited to say anything at all. The intensity of questioning during this PMQS session reached levels rarely seen in Parliament. Opposition leaders seized upon not just the content of Starmer's eventual statement, but the damaging optics of his prolonged absence from the conversation. Accusations of lying and backtracking rang through the chamber, with the Prime Minister appearing visibly uncomfortable as he attempted to defend both his position and his delay in articulating it. What Starmer and his team seemingly failed to appreciate was that in modern politics, timing matters almost as much as content. The 6-day vacuum had allowed others to define the narrative, establish their positions, and build cases against whatever the Prime Minister might eventually say. By the time he spoke, he was no longer setting the agenda, but responding to it, a fundamentally weaker position for any political leader. The weather-vane criticism of Starmer has proven particularly damaging in the wake of this Supreme Court debacle. By attempting to please everyone, he's succeeding at pleasing no one. Calculated centrism has left both sides questioning, not just his position, but his fundamental character. This pattern reveals something more concerning than mere political manoeuvring. It suggests a leadership vacuum at the heart of government. While Reform UK and Conservatives state clear positions that voters can either embrace or reject, Starmer's murky middle ground offers nothing concrete to grasp. The question voters increasingly ask isn't about where Starmer stands on this issue, but whether he stands for anything at all.